Students, welcome to the online class, and we will have the explanation of lesson number 1, a triumph of surgery, from our book Footprints Without Feet. So before getting into the explanation, let us have the introduction of the author. James Alfred Harriot was an English veterinary doctor or surgeon. Being a veterinary surgeon, he was an efficient and prolific writer. He wrote many stories about animals and their master. This story is one of his interesting stories that describes about a dog and his mistress. Now let's have the character introduction. Who are the main characters of this lesson? The first character is the author himself, James Alfred Harriot. The second character is the mistress of the dog named Tricky. The mistress is Mrs. Pumphrey. And the third is Tricky, a fat and plumpy dog. Mrs. Pumphrey had a dog named Tricky. She loved that dog very much. In fact, she was very much emotionally connected to that dog. And she kept that dog in a very comfortable place with all type of luxuries were provided to the dog, and plenty of edible things were supplied to this dog. That means this dog was given luxury, comfort, and plenty of things to eat. She would give him Horlicks. She would give him malt. Malt is a thing that is made of cereals and germinated grains. So she would give him malt, she would give him Horlicks, she would give him many things to eat. Now thus, this dog, Tricky, had become very fat. Thus it has become very plumpy and chubby, just like a bloated sausage. Now this thing was the major concern of the doctor. When the doctor had seen Tricky, it seemed to him that it is just like a bloated sausage. The size or the appearance of the dog is compared to a bloated sausage. That means the dog looked plumpy, chubby, fat. The dog suffered obese. So the doctor was very much concerned about the health of the dog, because he knows very well, if Tricky is provided so many things to eat, or if Tricky would go on eating things like Horlicks and malt and cod liver oil, one day Tricky would become ill, because Tricky was also addicted of overeating. He would do nothing but overeat. So this will make the dog ill. So the doctor advised Mrs. Pumphrey that if you will go on increasing the diet of the dog, if you will go on giving cod liver oil, malt and Horlicks to the dog, one day it will become ill. One day the dog will fall ill. So the doctor advised to cut the regular meal for the dog and keep the dog in proper exercise, or give the dog proper exercise. So this was the advice that was given by the Dr. James Harriet to Mrs. Pumpsfry. But what happens? She did not accept that advice. She did not accept the piece of advice that was given by the doctor. She continued to feed the dog. She continued to supply the dog with cod liver, Horlicks, malt, and everything that she could provide. And the dog became very fat, plumpy, and chubby. Now one day, a call was received by the doctor, James Harriet, and it was the call from Mrs. Pumpsfry. And she told the doctor that Tricky left eating food. That means Tricky is no longer eating food. It would lay on the floor motionless, doing nothing, and oftentimes it vomits. Now, the major concern of Mrs. Pumpsfry was the lax attitude of the dog. It did nothing except eating. But now this dog did not eat. It lost its appetite. And it looked dull, roomy. And the eyes of the dog were just like red as blood. So, this was the main concern of Mrs. Pumpsfry. And she told all these things to the doctor. That the dog did not like to eat anything. The dog would do nothing. And the dog sit motionless on the floor. It looked as if it is suffering from any disease. Now, according to Mrs. Pumpsfry, Tricky must be suffering from malnutrition. That means the proper diet or the proper nutrients are not provided to Tricky. That might be the possible reason why this dog is listless, why this dog is vomiting, why this dog is doing nothing. It is sitting motionless. Its eyes are red as blood and roomy. So she is thinking that the dog might be suffering from malnutrition. Even though she supplied a lot of things, plenty of things for the dog, like cod liver oil, Horlicks, and malt. But she thinks that the dog is suffering from malnutrition. The doctor, hearing these things from Mrs. Pumpsfry, advised her that Tricky needs to be hospitalized for a fortnight. He is to be kept under observation and possibly might need a surgery. So this is the advice of James Harriet, the surgeon, that Tricky must be kept in the hospital under the observation, and possibly they might need a surgery for Tricky. On the advice of the doctor, Tricky was brought into the hospital. He was kept along with the other dogs under observation. Now, what type of treatment could be given to a dog which eats more, do nothing. The doctor understood the real problem of Tricky. He understood the fault of Tricky is that he is greedy for food. He would eat plenty of food. That means he is addicted of overeating. It's because Mrs. Pumpsfrey would supply many things like Horlicks, malt, cod liver oil, and many things for Tricky to eat. So that's the reason why Tricky has become just like a blotted sausage, chubby, plumpy, and fat. Now the doctor understood this problem of Tricky, and he advised the attendants of the hospital that no food will be given to Tricky for 2 days. Therefore, Tricky was not given any food for 2 days. In these 2 days, plenty of water was given to him. Now, after 2 days, what happens? Tricky becomes active. A kind of responsive behavior can be seen in Tricky. The first time when he had come into the hospital, even though there were a lot of dogs like him in the hospital, he was not active. He was not responsive to the surrounding as well. But now, the doctor observed that Tricky is becoming active. He is responsive to his surrounding. On the 3rd day, he began to whimper when he heard the sound of the other dogs. Later on, he would sit there doing nothing, looking at the dogs who would bark there, looking at the dogs jumping and running around in the premises, but he would not go and join the other dogs. But on the 3rd day, he became responsive even to the sound or the barking sound of the other dogs, as if Tricky wanted to join the other dogs. This was a positive change observed in Tricky's behavior. You see here, the doctor first provided an environment. In the house of Mrs. Pumpsfrey, Tricky was alone. There were no dogs. There were no other animals with whom he can live. But here, an environment is provided. He could see similar dogs like him running, jumping, barking, and doing other activities. So the first thing that the doctor did was to bring Tricky into a different environment along with the other dogs. And the second thing that the doctor did was he cut off the diet or the food of Tricky. For 2 days, Tricky was not given any food to eat. He survived on water. He did not have anything to eat except water. So the second thing the doctor did was to cut off the meal, cut off the food that were given to the dog. And the third thing, most important thing, the doctor let Tricky to involve in or among the other dogs. There was a time of their meal. There was a time when all the dogs are fed by the hospital attendant. During that time, all the dogs would come out from their habitat, and they are allowed to eat freely from the bowl. So during that time, a lot of commotion is there. Many dogs run, many dogs jump, and all of them collectively eat. A lot of chaos and lot of commotion is there. So Tricky had been watching this for 2 days, but on the third day, what happens to Tricky? He also started to join them while they were provided food. And not only that, he started to run with the other dogs. He started to jump with the other dog. Even when the other dogs bark, he also barks. So this type of behavior, responsive behavior, has been observed in Tricky. Now after that, what happens? The doctor would take him for the daily exercise. Natural exercise like jumping, running, and so on. So within a week, Tricky became strong. Tricky became active. Tricky was responsive to the other dogs. He is much stronger than ever before, active than ever before. Even though he was not given any medical treatment, not any kind of medical treatment was given to him. Only strict diet, exercise, and his mingling with the other dogs made him physically fit and healthy. Meanwhile, his treatment in the hospital, his mistress would come to the hospital with plenty of things for Tricky. She brought eggs. She brought many things to eat. But it was not given to Tricky. The doctor and the attendant would eat all the edible things provided by Mrs. Pumphrey. And after the process of treatment is over, the doctor made a call to Mrs. Pumphrey and informed her that now Tricky is all right. Now Tricky is absolutely fit and healthy, and soon she have to come to get back him to her house. And at the news of the doctor, Mrs. Pumphrey was very happy. She was very glad to hear that her dog is now become all right. Her dog is now healthy and fit, needs no more treatment. So she thought to go to the hospital in order to get back Tricky to her home. As she received the call from the doctor to get back Tricky to her home, she go to the hospital. And this time, when she saw Tricky, She was amazed, she was shocked to see that within 2 weeks, Tricky had become flexible. He is transformed into a flexible, hard muscle, strong and active animal. All this is because of the doctor. All this is because of the treatment that was given by Dr. Harriet. She was very happy to see Tricky fully recovered. As soon as Tricky saw his mistress, he jumped and leaped on her. She took the dog in her hands and fully convinced that Tricky is now all right, fine and healthy. But she failed to convey her gratitude towards Dr. Harriet. She don't have words to describe her thankfulness towards the doctor. And she moved out of the hospital in a car. She was holding the dog by her hands and tears rolled down from her cheeks. She could not find words to express her gratitude because all this happened because of the doctor. It was due to the doctor that the Tricky is now all right, fine, hard muscle and flexible and stronger than ever before. So she was overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude, and she could not find words to express her gratitude. And all that she could say that this is, of course, a triumph of surgery. And this ends the chapter.